The war room of the sovereign conclave smelled like burnt ozone and old victories. General Vrathkor had stood in this chamber for 40 years, watching lesser species bend. He had watched the Calvary sign surrender documents with trembling hands. He had watched the Soon Collective's emissaries weep at the table. He had presided over the capitulation of 7 civilizations, and each one had taught him the same lesson: show enough force, and anything with a pulse will flinch. He had not yet met a human. That was about to change. The delegation arrived at 0900 hours shipboard time, 3 figures escorted through the main corridor by a pair of conclave wardens. The wardens were impressive creatures, 8 feet tall, chitinous, built like siege engines. They flanked the humans the way mountains flank a river. The implicit message was clear. You are small. We are large. Act accordingly. The first 2 humans were diplomats. Vrathkor could smell it on them, the careful posture, the practiced stillness, the way their eyes catalogued the room without appearing to. A man and a woman, both in formal attire, both carrying the quiet tension of people who understood the stakes. The third human was something else. She stood slightly apart from the other 2, not behind them, not ahead, just separate, the way a blade sits separate from the hand that holds it. Her uniform was dark, undecorated, save for a single patch on the left shoulder that Vrathkor's translator rendered as Special Operations Command. Her hair was pulled back severely. She had the kind of stillness that wasn't peace, it was conservation, like a coiled spring that had learned patience. Her name, the dossier said, was Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez. She was there as a security escort, a formality the human diplomats had insisted, protocol. Vrathkor found her immediately irritating. He was not accustomed to being studied. He was accustomed to being feared. The 2 diplomats, Ambassador Hale and Deputy Ambassador Chen, looked at him with appropriate gravity. But Vasquez looked at him the way a mechanic looks at an engine, methodically, without awe, cataloging parts. The negotiations began. They were, predictably, a disaster. The conclave's terms were simple. Humanity would cede the outer margin systems, reduce their fleet by 60%, and submit to inspection protocols for the next century. The humans, equally predictably, refused. Ambassador Hale spoke carefully, offering counter-proposals. Deputy Ambassador Chen laid out economic arguments with precision and grace. Vrathkor let them finish. Then he dismissed every word they said. You speak as though you have leverage, he said, his voice carrying the easy contempt of a man who had broken better civilizations. You do not. Your fleet is outmatched. Your colonies are exposed. Your homeworld. Our homeworld, Ambassador Hale said, quietly, has been fighting wars since before your species discovered metallurgy. Vrathkor paused. It was a small pause, less than a second, but it was real. The audacity of the statement required processing. Then he smiled. Bold words, from a diplomat. Accurate words, Hale said. The smile faded. Vrathkor stood, all 7 feet of him, and moved around the table with the deliberate slowness of something that has never needed to hurry. The warden straightened. The room's atmosphere shifted. He stopped in front of Ambassador Hale. He looked down at the human. He had intended only intimidation, the classic calculus of overwhelming physical presence. But something about Hale's calm refusal to look away sparked something old and ugly in Vrathkor's chest. His hand moved before he had fully decided to move it. The strike was open-palmed, not a killing blow, not even a serious injury. It was a lesson, a reminder, the kind of thing Vrathkor had done to subordinates who forgot their place, and the kind of thing he had done to enemy commanders during interrogations to establish the correct hierarchy of the room. Ambassador Hale's head snapped sideways. He stumbled against the table. The sound was very loud in the sudden silence. For exactly 1 second, nothing moved. Then Elena Vasquez moved. She didn't run. Running implies urgency, implies panic, implies the scramble of someone trying to catch up to events. Vasquez moved the way water moves, filling space with complete, unhurried inevitability. One moment, she was 4 meters away. The next, she was there, between Vrathkor and Hale, and her hand had found the general's wrist with a grip that stopped his arm mid-retraction. Vrathkor felt the grip. Really felt it. His species' bones were dense. His musculature was built for combat. He outweighed this human by a factor of 3. And yet the fingers around his wrist held with a mechanical certainty that sent a message his brain processed before his pride could intercept it. She is not stopping you because she is stronger. She is stopping you because she has already calculated 11 ways this ends, and she has chosen the one where you do not get to use your arm again. General, Vasquez said. Her voice was calm, not the brittle calm of suppressed fear, not the performed calm of someone trying to project confidence they didn't have. It was the calm of a woman who had made peace with catastrophically bad outcomes and was simply waiting to see which one materialized. Release the ambassador's wrist, she said, or I will release it for you. The 2 conclave wardens were moving now. Vrathkor could hear their armored feet on the floor, feel the vibration. His own guards, positioned at the door, had their hands near weapons. None of it seemed to register on Vasquez's face. One of the wardens reached out to grab her shoulder. She released Vrathkor's wrist, and in the same motion, smooth and unhurried as turning a page, she redirected the warden's momentum, stepped inside its reach, and applied pressure to a joint that her pre-mission briefing had identified as a structural vulnerability in Conclave Warden's exoskeletal frame. The warden made a sound that was not dignified. It did not fall, but it listed. It listed the way a ship lists when a critical strut fails, still technically upright, but suddenly very aware of the possibility of not being upright. The second warden froze. The guards at the door froze. Vrathkor froze. Vasquez straightened her jacket. She hadn't broken a sweat. Her heart rate, if the bioscan the conclave was running was accurate, had elevated by approximately 8 beats per minute. The bioscans of everyone else in the room told a different story. She looked at Vrathkor. I'm not going to apologize for that, she said. The ambassador is under my protection. You struck him. I responded proportionally. She paused. I want you to understand something, General, I responded proportionally. That was me being careful. Vrathkor's pride screamed at him to escalate. 40 years of dominance demanded it. 7 broken civilizations demanded it. But something older than pride, something that lived in the part of the brain responsible for keeping organisms alive, was sending a different signal. The signal said, "Look at her eyes." He looked. There was no hatred in them, no rage, no bloodlust, nothing hot. They were the eyes of someone filling out paperwork present, professional, mildly inconvenienced. She wasn't hoping he would escalate. She wasn't afraid he would escalate. She genuinely did not seem to care which way it went, and that indifference was the most frightening thing Vrathkor had encountered in 40 years of war. He stepped back. It was a small step, barely perceptible, but it was real, and everyone in the room saw it, and everyone in the room would remember it. Ambassador Hale straightened, touched his jaw, and looked at Vrathkor with an expression that contained no triumph. Only the quiet confirmation of something he had already known. I'd like to resume negotiations, Hale said. On the original terms. The session lasted another 3 hours. The conclave did not get its outer margin systems. The fleet reduction clause was struck from the document entirely. The inspection protocols were rewritten to apply to both parties equally. Vrathkor signed. He told himself it was strategy, that he was playing a longer game, that one session did not define a war. He had 100 reasons, and every one of them was technically true, and none of them were the real reason. The real reason was 11 centimeters long and made of reinforced polymer, the joint lock tool that Vasquez had used on the warden, which she had produced and retracted so smoothly that half the room had missed it. He had seen her handed back to her tactical vest afterward. She had come to a negotiation with joint lock tools. Not weapons, tools. As though disabling a conclave warden mid-session was a maintenance task, something you came prepared for, handled efficiently, and moved on from. As the human delegation filed out of the war room, Vasquez was last. She paused in the doorway for precisely 1 second and looked back at Vrathkor. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything. She just looked. Then she was gone. Vrathkor stood in the room that smelled like burnt ozone and old victories, and he thought about all the civilizations he had broken at that table. He thought about how none of them had ever looked at him like that. And for the first time in 40 years, he picked up a dossier on an enemy species and started reading it from the beginning.